Hello. We are back with another reading of Surviving Sydney Cove, the diary of Elizabeth Harvey. We're up to Sunday, 9th of May. Well, this morning, Master Henry Dodd called everyone to join him under a stand of red gums. He began the service with the Lord's Prayer and then Rock of Ages. The militia's drummer and fife accompanied our singing, but many felt too low to join in. Halfway through a Rock of Ages, the skies opened up. Soon, our clothes were drenched. Leaves and twigs squelched under our feet, streams trickled into puddles. Master Dodd ignored the rain and stood on a log to deliver his sermon. He is a plain man with a round face, pockmarked skin, hidden under coarse brown hair, and a 3-day beard. His blunt speech and manner reminded me of our papas. He urged us to keep up our spirits, saying that if we neglected to pray, all would be lost. He promised us that any day more ships would sail from Cape Town into Sydney Cove. These ships will carry enough provisions to last us until more crops will be reaped. What if the ships don't come? Someone called from the crowd. What if Noah had not prayed? He answered right back. Remember how Noah and his family stayed on their ark 40 days and 40 nights? Why, if Noah had lost faith, none of us would be here. Not everyone could accept this. Someone called, perchance Noah had enough to fill his belly, and faith to him were easier. Another cried, Noah had all those animals to eat when he was hungry. Yes, we're starving too much to pray. If they thought this could silence Master Dodd, they were sorely mistaken. He reminded us of how brave we had been at sea, how in the coldest and stormiest leg of our journey, we had helped each other survive. He finished off by describing all our achievements this last year in Rose Hill, telling us how we were so much better off than anyone in Port Jackson. This year, there's been little rain, and by the time his sermon was over, the sky was rich, deep blue. A flock of scarlet and green and yellow rose hillers flew overhead. Someone shouted that this was a good omen, and we set off for our huts far more cheerfully than we had left them. After our sparse dinners, my master said that he would stay with Emily, and he gave me a few hours to spend however I might desire. I went to visit Sarah. Over a cup of licorice tea, she told me that there is talk in Sydney Cove that everyone, and this includes the militia, and even their officers, must take turns catching fish. Picturing some of these proud men casting lines and then having to scale and gut those smelly creatures made us laugh most heartily. Not that Winston will mind too much, I said. I think he enjoys fishing. She said, well, have you two become friends? Well, Winston's never rude, but he always lets me know that he is militia and I am a convict. Besides, I frowned uncertainly. Well, perchance I imagine it, but whenever he addresses me, his stammer grows worse. She smiled knowingly. That young man must learn how often it's only luck that separates rich from poor. I hugged her. Maybe Sarah cannot read or write or say her words properly, but she is truly a wise woman. She hugged me back, crying, I really miss you, Lizzie. Jane does her job well enough, but she ain't no fun to be with. I miss you too, Sarah, I cried, and we held each other for a very long time. When I got back to the Russells, Emily was lying on her pallet, sobbing as if her heart would break. Where were you, Lizzie? She cried. I thought you were gone forever. I placed her on my lap, saying, I was only visiting Sarah. You and me are great friends, and you know that I will never part from you. But my mama said that, she sobbed, and then she went to heaven. She buried her head in my chest. She was so hot and feverish, it took me an hour to calm her down. Fortunately, Sarah had found enough flour to bake Emily a heart-shaped biscuit. I showed it to her, and she brightened up very quickly. Monday, 10th of May. A morning of misfortune. Emily is still feverish and refuses to eat. Her father tells me that I must force her to drink as much water as possible, but even water makes her throw up. I have seen this illness before. It comes from our salt meat, which is so rotten, my master thinks that we would be healthier only eating dry peas, oats, and rice, and whatever vegetables we can get past our way. To add to my distress, while laundering, I dropped a full cauldron of boiling water. I narrowly missed scalding my feet. When I had to fetch more water and find wood to fill the wood box, to add to my annoyance, our last sliver of soap slid into the cauldron and melted away completely. To make more soap, I needed potash, and animal fat. Of course I have none. I worry that if the surgeon hears about these misadventures, he might want another servant. Someone stronger and less clumsy. By late afternoon, I had brought all the washing inside. It looked clean enough, though with more ribs for me to mend. Emily was no longer as feverish, and I heard her drinking a little water and nibbling on a biscuit. Peas porridge and rice for supper. The surgeon did not arrive until well after sunset. He looked so weary, with barely enough energy to light his pipe, that I felt very sorry for him. He tells me that shortly we must all move back to Sydney Cove, for he is needed there to help the sick. I pray that this will not happen too soon. Of course, Lizzie, you'll come with us, he said. But as that means I must leave Sarah behind, I'm in two minds over this, even though I would dearly love to see what is happening in Sydney Cove. Tuesday, 11th of May. This morning, Emily had a little more colour in her cheeks. I'm sure that it is the wild herbs I forced her to eat, though she always groans and complains they are far too bitter. She finished her lessons and demanded a reward. I clapped my hands and sang her a rhyme Mama sang to you, Edward. Intery, mintery, cuttery corn, brambly briar and brambly thorn. Wire, briar, barrel lock, 3 geese in a flock. 1 flew east, 1 flew west, and 1 flew over the cuckoo's nest. When we got to the end, I tickled Emily's ribs like Mama did ours. Emily laughed so much I sang and sang until I could not manage another croak. Edward, I think that in some ways Emily has replaced you in my mind. Not that I love you any less, you're still my closest living relative. But you are so far away, who knows if we shall see each other again. All I can hope is that this journal will sooner or later arrive in Cranham. Then you will know that I have never forgotten you. Winston arrived shortly before supper, carrying 4 pink and grey cockatoos. We were hungry enough to eat anything that walks, crawls, or flies. But it pained me to see those pretty birds so dead and bedraggled. Ugh. Winston started to tell me how he had trapped them and wrung their necks. I shuddered and told him that I would rather not know. It won't stop you eating them, will it? He snapped at me impatiently. We would have quarrelled then and there, only he picked up the birds and stalked off. When he returned, I saw that he had cut off their heads and gutted them. I dipped the carcasses in boiling water, plucked their feathers, and skewered them on sticks. Now I could pretend they were only chickens. But I was still very cross. I told myself that Winston might think he is all grown because he is a member of the Royal Marines. But he is just a teasing boy. If I once thought we might be friends, then I was sorely mistaken. When his papa arrived home, we cooked the birds over the fire and ate them with a little peas pudding. The taste reminded us of a wild fowl, though it was a little more gamey. With supper over, Emily reminded her papa that she wished to hear more of my story. The surgeon lit his pipe and drew on it. We have quite a mystery in Lizzie, he told his children. Perchance there are things she might not want to relate. Not true, sir, I cried hotly. God knows I have nothing to hide. Except for a bad temper, Winston murmured. I was about to answer that I am only bad-tempered when sorely provoked. Just in time, I bit my tongue. Edward, our mama always said that I let it run away with me. I must remind myself that I am only a servant, a girl and a convict. They can dismiss me whenever they please, but it is hard to stay silent when others are being stupid or insensitive. Thankfully, Emily cried. The surgeon reached out to stroke his daughter's arm. Why, Lizzie's a beautiful lady who must tell 1,001 stories so as not to lose her head. Emily giggled and slid her thumb into her mouth. She does not always take her papa and brother as seriously as I must. The surgeon turned to me. On with your story, he said sternly, or we will be too sleepy to listen. I had almost forgotten where I had left off, but Winston quickly reminded me. I took my sewing closer to the fire, then I started on how Nance, the other apprentice, had been 15 and grown, and how I could not help notice that she and Silas, who was our manservant, spent much time whispering in corners when they thought no one saw them. My mistress had already told us how several small things had gone missing. A gold ribbon, 2 bobbins of thread, a small pair of scissors. When she discovered that a silken gown and matching bonnet, these made for a fine lady, were also missing, she set up such a cry, one might have thought everything she owned had been stolen. She brought Silas, Nance, and myself into her workroom to question us. We insisted that we knew nothing about it. My mistress fixed us with a glare that could kill a man. Goods worth over 7 shillings, she cried. If any of you have taken them, why, I will have you in jail before you can count to 10. She combed through the attic where Nance and I slept. I had tied 6 shillings I had brought with me into a kerchief and hidden this in my wooden box. I had hoped that while in London I might earn a guinea or 2. Then my plan was to return to Crenham and use the money to keep Edward and myself in modest comfort. Immediately, my mistress found this money. She decided that it was hers and that I had stolen it. No matter how much I had protested my innocence, she called the runners and they marched me off to jail.